I just don't know what you're doing in my closet. Oh, I guess it's time for the weekly roundup, so it's actually quite convenient that you're here. These last 2 weeks went a bit slow and we only got through one book, but it was good. This is a hard nut to crack. We read the short stories of Haruki Murakami, some of them, from Barn Burning, TV People, and The Dancing Dwarf. All great short stories if you end up interested in this author that I'd recommend checking out. Murakami has a way of writing that confuses, mixing mundane with absurd, almost giving you a uncertainty of place, as in, this world feels familiar, this time feels familiar, and yet I've never been here before. There's something odd. It can almost seem random, the things he's talking about, and yet his effect is very poignant. And so I don't think he uses randomness. I don't think he spits out random words on a page. I think rather Murakami is very exact in using disorder. What does that mean? Does that mean anything? Well, I'll get to that later. First, I'd like to give a sort of formula that I notice for how Murakami's stories work generally, though hard to formulate, for sure. They start out usually in a fairly mundane setting. Uninteresting narrator talking about uninteresting life. Then you sort of get this billboard, this weird billboard. As if, you're driving through this boring town, and suddenly you see something odd on the billboard, and you're like, what was that? Did I just see that? That's some sort of event, like the young businessman casually mentioning that he's an arsonist, or the girl at the party who just happens to be a dedicated pantomimer in her free time. And you're like, that's odd. And you keep on driving through the story. And it keeps on happening more and more, and then all of a sudden you're like, where the heck am I? Am I really in the same town anymore? Because there's something wrong with this place. One moment, my life was normal. The next, there's small people coming into my house, non-consensually installing a TV, and then leaving, without paying any attention to me. To clarify, these are all examples from Murakami stories, not my own life. So, there we go. Establish world. Then he gives you that kind of psychological effect that kind of makes you shiver of like, wait, where am I? What the heck is going on? But then he makes it very clear how the narrator reacts in an oddly mundane way to the absurd. This world is a mixture of absurd and mundane in many of his stories. And you start to see how much of that is within the narrator, and you start to doubt the narrator. But then you realize, well, the things a narrator is seeing aren't necessarily impossible. In fact, maybe I've seen something like that before. I don't know, people kind of are crazy. And that effect slowly works back until it kind of gets you into this weird existential spot. Cool. But how does he do it? How does he create that unease that finally gets you into this spot? You've probably, in regard to writing or anything else, heard something like, you gotta know the rules to break the rules. I think Murakami is a great example of this. This goes back to what I was talking about, disorder versus chaos. Murakami seems random, but what he's doing is actually making the antithesis of a digestible, orderly story. He clearly understands how form and content, in a sense, ought to match, or at least how people expect them to match, because he totally flips them on his head. If the narrator talks in a mundane way, you expect him to be talking of mundane things. But no, the character, again, is talking in a mundane way about these small people installing a TV in his house without consent or warning. it's pure disorder. It's not just randomness, it's a precise inversion of expectation. So I guess bottom line, what can we learn from Murakami in our writing? I think a lot of it comes back to his psychological effect. That, in effect, should kind of come on slowly and work towards the person, out of the world into the reader. And further, again, repeating my first, or not my first, but my main point, that you really do have to understand the mechanisms of a story, at least in the sense of a story of how people expect a story to go, in order to escape those boundaries. Murakami would have not have been able to write in such a bizarrely, seemingly random way if he hadn't understood how to do quite the opposite of that and write, like I said, a digestible, in a sense, expected story. Now, if anything I've said here is a bit vague, that's understandable. So if you want, feel free to check out the stream, because that's when I'm actually reading things live and coming to these conclusions and trying to figure out the author for myself. But I think better yet, if you're not satisfied with this explanation, I'd encourage you to go and check out Murakami yourself. Read some of these stories. Maybe think about my take on them and see if that helps you kind of unpack this guy, because he's a bit of a mystery. But yeah, anyway, I'll be doing more of this, trying to get through a book a week on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, 5 through 6 on those days. On Twitch. Anyhow, thank you for watching. I get out of my closet, and I hope to see you later.